All right, take two. Take two. So
Okay.
microphones weren't working. Micah, so great to have you on the show again.
It's great to be here. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's like I haven't seen you in 5 minutes.
Okay, so I've already shown this to you, but I want you to comment on this again. Okay, so about 10 years ago, there's an artist, I can't remember his name, local Utah artist.
Oh no, you're going to show this again?
Yeah, I am.
Oh
He
my
achieved
God.
a level of, I mean, he's not doing well because he's gotten older and his mind's kind of going, and his kids held an estate sale that I helped with.
Yeah.
And in his bathroom, he had this.
Yep. There it is again.
When did you paint that?
Probably in 02 or 03.
Yes, it's been a while.
It's been a while.
There is no date on it at all.
That's my guess. Somewhere around 03 is my guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. Just because of the subject matter, and I know I've painted her a bunch of times, and
you have.
I painted that when I was above Benihana. Do you remember that, or did we know each other then?
I think we didn't. But I know of the period. Right?
Okay,
like
I was above Benihana, so it was probably 2003. Yeah, good times, man. I've painted her like 5 times or something like that.
Is she still alive?
I hope so, because I would be really sad if she wasn't, and I had missed her funeral, but she's got to be close to 90, if not older at this point. I think when I painted her 23 years ago, she was 64-ish.
Really?
So yeah, so I guess she's 87-ish.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think she probably is alive. She just keeps moving, man. She keeps going. She's probably still alive.
Was it ever important to her to have an example of your paintings of her?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's funny you should ask that, because she was a criminal when it came to that. I mean, I don't mean literally. I don't mean literally, but she had this thing that she would do where she'd say, "Jeff, could you come demo on my painting?" And I'd do a little demo. I'd get the lesson done, the thing that she needed to see. But she knew with me that once I started demoing and having fun, that if she were to allow me to continue, I would continue because I'm enjoying myself. So most students, I would always say to everybody, including her, I'd say, "Okay, there it is. That's what you need to know." And then I'd be ready to move on, even though I'm enjoying myself. But she would always say, no, keep going, keep going. And then a few minutes later, I'd be like, "Okay, I think we got it. We got what we need." And she's like, no, keep going, keep going. And then I'd eventually just completely repaint her painting, but she would just stick it in her locker and it would be her paint, and she'd take it home as a Jeff HEIN painting. It would be unsigned, but she has to have like a dozen Jeff HEIN paintings that are just me completely painting over her painting, and she just keeps egging me on. "No, keep going, Jeff, keep going, keep going." She's got to have a million.
It's funny. There's this group of artists who were American that studied in France, and they studied with this guy named Albert Rigolo, who was kind of, if you went to the Académie Julienne, which is where Bouguereau and Bouguereau taught, and Jules Lefebvre and a lot of other great artists, they all did human figure. And so they'd say to these students, they'd say, "If you want to learn landscape, go take private lessons with Albert Rigolo." And he did these weekend courses where you go and paint with him. And there was this really poor American artist who lived in Utah named J.B. Fairbanks. And J.B. Fairbanks always wanted to and couldn't afford it. So what he did instead is he went back to France after he had a little bit more of a career to take painting lessons from Rigolo, whose works were in the Paris Salon and selling for tens of thousands of dollars, even at the turn of the century. And he took the class from Rigolo, which is a 2-week class, and he was out there painting with him every day. And he would put up a canvas and pretend to paint on it, and then Rigolo would come by and would paint on it to like correct it. And then Fairbanks would take down Rigolo's painting and then paint his own painting. And then when Rigolo came back again, he'd put back up the one that Rigolo had painted on before, until by the end of 2 weeks, Rigolo had painted an entire landscape.
You're kidding me.
on the like, and without knowing it, like Fairbanks had tricked him into painting a work that he could take home.
That is classic. Oh my
it's
gosh.
it's now hanging. It's now hanging in the Springville Museum of Art, and Vern Swanson calls it the Fairbanks Rigolo because it's not signed by either one of them. Rigolo, because like you're like that model, you never signed it. He just kind of tricked her. So there's got to be a long history of this kind of like
Oh, there
mentor
probably is.
thievery,
I mean,
right?
now in workshops, I actually intentionally say bring several canvases so that I can demo on a separate canvas so that you can have it and see it instead of painting on top of it again. Because oftentimes
That's good to know.
oftentimes I'll critique someone and I'll paint on their painting with their permission, but
Yeah.
then they paint on top of it again and they lose what I did. And
Mm.
sometimes they get lost again and they don't know they don't know where they're going again, but all the evidence of my previous demo is gone. So I end
That
up
makes
coming
sense.
back and doing the same demo again, saying, here's what you did, here's what you didn't get in the last time I demoed. So I just
Mm.
started saying, bring multiple canvases and I'll just demo on separate canvases. And
That makes sense. That makes
yeah,
perfect sense.
yeah. So I don't fight that type very often. In fact, I'm sort of encouraging it, I guess.
You're gonna for it. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah.
So
So
I gotta bring up a somewhat controversial topic.
what's that?
I've been debating whether or not to talk about this.
Oh, I can't
So
wait.
you had on your podcast a few weeks ago, Saban Howard.
Oh, yeah.
And Saban Howard and I have known each other for a while now, and he's in Utah. He moved here, and he's working on this major monument. And when I first got the I don't know what he's calling it. It's the arch, whatever this enormous arch is, which is a very ambitious project, right?
Oh, yeah.
And when I first met Saban, that was not at all the idea he came to Utah with. He was working on a monument that was more like the World War I monument in DC. That was one flat panel that was still monumental, but it was going to go out of state.
Hmm.
And it was potentially going to go to one of like a few locations. And I'm sure that's the way that this happens with monuments, right? Is that,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, who wants the life of a sculptor where you're often, especially if you're doing monumental work, very dependent on committees,
Oh, yeah.
all kinds of, I mean, nightmare, right? The thing that's controversial is that now this monument, he's kind of the governor and his crew have kind of tricked this neighborhood and the system into placing it in a park without the consent of the neighborhood and against the rules that the governor and his committee actually had written up to have something placed there. And so
What?
now there's kind of like this, like the cap, it's going in a park next to the state capitol. The park is not controlled by the Capitol Commission that is given it permission. So that's one break in
Yeah.
rules, right? Another one is that there were two other monuments that had gone through a year-long process of vetting that were completely dismissed with and but had gone through all this review process, and then Saban shows up and a backdoor deal was made without any, any
Two other
uh
Utah artists were
yep,
proposing a
yep,
sculpture.
two other major projects that were all that had gone through years and hundreds of thousands, if
I
not
wasn't
millions
aware
of
of that.
dollars of preparation. And then the neighborhood doesn't want it, and there's also some controversial content potentially in it, which is all stuff that stuff can potentially be solved, right?
Right.
It can potentially be solved.
Right.
And Saban has been updating me all along. He'd probably be surprised that I have this opinion, but I've been pretty straightforward with him about things. The thing that the reason why I want to bring it up is that I'm opening a museum this week,
Yeah.
and it would be very easy. And this is kind of what I noticed in the podcast with Saban, and I hope I have a chance to talk with him about it. But I think it's something worth doing since we have kind of a public forum here.
Mm-hmm.
And Saban, if you hear this, I'm happy to talk about this publicly with you, right? But it's the idea that on one hand, he has such a strong vision,
Mm-hmm.
and he's he feels literally inspired by God to do what he's doing, and he's
Mm-hmm.
said that multiple times. And I think it takes that to do monumental work. I don't begrudge or dismiss that. I think
Mm-hmm.
that people who do big projects, they've got to be visionary. They've got to be stubborn, or else they don't get made,
Mm-hmm.
right? But any of us who do things that are for the public, that are on public land, that involve lots of people, it requires a very strange combination of making sure that you're visionary and also that you're including other people in the process.
Mm.
And I think that it'll be interesting to see. The story's not done with this monument that Saban's doing. I think we're at the very beginning of what's going to be a long fight. And he mentioned in the podcast that he loves these kind of fights. He like the mentality was, I'm built for for
Mm-hmm.
fighting these things out. And that was what kind of surprised me about the podcast, that I wanted to, you know, just mention my own opinion on, is that I think that one mentality, and who knows, maybe I'm wrong. He's had to fight this fight before when he got the World War I monument done,
Mm-hmm.
right? Maybe it does take an adversarial approach to things. But as I've been doing this museum, the approach has been almost the opposite. It's almost been like, hey, let's bring as many people on board and make this everybody's vision, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't feel like my vision has been diminished. In fact, I feel like my vision has expanded as a result
Mm-hmm.
of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's something to think about. Again, I don't know if I have all the answers. I have not done tons of public works and projects. I think that it's something that's worth having as a public conversation, though. And I wanted to give a counterpoint to it. That's why I'm bringing it up.
Oh, I don't.
I
Yeah.
didn't want to say he's wrong, he's dumb, I don't
Yeah.
like him. I really do admire what it takes to do something. And I think if you're an artist, it's especially hard because it's your vision.
Yeah. That's
But
what I was just gonna say.
it's also hard though when it's representing and going in somebody's front yard.
Yeah. So this park that's going in is a public park? I was under the impression it was private property.
No, no, it's actually, if you look at public records, it's owned by the state and it's subject to states and parks. In fact, it's been leased out to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints for many years
Wait, is it that
by
little
the
corner
public
by that
parks.
church?
Hmm. Yeah.
Though that's like a little triangle?
Hmm.
That's a
Yeah.
public park? I
It's
didn't
a
know
public
that.
park. Yeah, it's a
It's
public
not that
park.
big.
No, but I mean, it's big enough for what
Oh, it's
he's
big enough
planning.
for
I
that.
mean, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, they haven't done any. And that's one of the major arteries into the city,
Yeah.
and it's not a big road. And
No.
so, how you're going to get like safety and transportation through it is something that hasn't been addressed yet. I'm sure it will be addressed
Yeah, there's gonna be a lot
because
of
it's just part
rubbernecking
of
for
it.
a while.
Right. It's something that, you know, that's the case with any of these things. I'm sure that somebody complained when the Washington Monument went up, was like, hey, it's getting in the way of my bicycle path, right?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
there are always those kinds of things. That's not the issue. The issue is, I think, I think that when you do something like this, if you want, and it's something that has interested me as I've looked back in history. Michelangelo had the support of Pope Julius II, but a lot of people in the church did not want it. They hated the nudity. They thought it was, an offensive work. And I think time won out, and people realized how much of a work of genius it is. I hope that happens with this project, but it's messy in the beginning. It didn't have to be this messy, and I think it's going to be messy for a while. And
Mm.
I think that it's kind of different with somebody like you, because you're doing a painting, right? You're doing monumental paintings. You're kind of you're not hanging them
They're in a
on
building.
public property,
Right. Right.
right?
No one's forced to look at it when they drive
No,
down Beck Street. Yeah.
but this is also the nature of public sculpture,
Yeah.
right? Is that public sculptors have a different relationship with their art than painters do, for the most
Mhm.
part. There are some muralists in history who really have to worry about whether or not they've got everybody's interest at stake. But I think that we have to.
Hmm.
I think we have to be, when we're making, and like this museum, we're going to be talking today about an artist who painted the West just as the West was being populated by the gold rush and people coming from back east, which essentially continued the long destruction of Native American lands and ownership of those lands in ways that was, frankly, pretty despicable. And then these people romanticized the Native Americans and romanticized the lands that they were in,
Mm-hmm.
even at the time that they were like, you know, like destroying it. It's kind of like and I think that as we've told this exhibition, we put together this exhibition, I literally went to the descendants of the Native Americans who this artist met. And, hey, I'm
Really?
going to give you a chance to say a few things about what what you think about this period and what happened.
Mm.
And I'm not going to do it to say that this artist was an evil genius, because I don't think he was. I think that the artist thought that he was honoring the Native Americans, right? Um, but he didn't quite. But it kind of like, it was interesting how it opened up another layer of the exhibition for me, of thinking, somebody we may call that woke politics. But the reality is, I live in a community where there are descendants of people who are Native Americans and settlers and pioneers and recent immigrants. And and if I'm telling one person's story without telling another person's story, who is part of that original story, then you know, it's not. It is kind of another missed opportunity,
Mm.
I think,
Hmm.
to share that perspective. I don't think we have to make villains out of people, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
we don't have to make everybody a victim either, right? Not everybody has to be a victim to be heard. This Native American story certainly wasn't a story about, when I talked to them, wasn't about victimhood. We can talk about it when we get to this painter's
Hmm.
actual paintings. But I just think I've been thinking a lot about that interview you did with Saban, and I hope I get a chance to talk to him. And I hope I don't come across as like too critical. It's more like a thought of how do we do these public things in a way that isn't confrontational. That's what it is.
Yeah, it's interesting. That one element that when I was doing the podcast I wasn't aware of. I don't think he mentioned it, and maybe he did and I just missed it. But I had no idea that this was a quote unquote public sculpture. I mean, I knew it was going to be seen by the public, obviously, but I
Yeah,
thought it was private land. And on private land, you can do whatever the heck you want,
yeah,
right?
it's
I
true.
had no idea he was working with public land.
Yeah,
Maybe
I
I
don't know
did
if
and I
he knows.
forgot. Do you remember me saying
No,
one way or the other?
I don't think he knows the whole story. I think that he and I don't know. I don't know.
I could have
But
sworn he
but
even
what
said he had an investor that was giving the land or something. I don't know.
there are people who are private investors who are paying for it, but it's still on public land.
Oh.
And it'll probably be a mix, mostly of private funds, but a lot of some public funds too. I just think you got to be careful. You got to be careful.
Well,
And
putting
I
on
think
public
that,
land is a whole different thing. I mean, if it were private, I'd be like,
yeah,
screw everybody. I'm going to do what I want to do. It's private. It's my land, you know?
he and I remember him saying something, and I stick by this. The first time I met him, he got very political very quickly with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's a surprise to anybody, because he's very public about it, that he's very conservative.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of center left,
Mm-hmm.
right, in my politics. I don't really like to talk about politics a lot, because I don't think I'm not an expert, right?
Yeah.
First of all, and I don't think it's very easy to change people's minds, and and I don't think it's productive. But I remember him like saying to me, and he's like, "Hey, you agree with me, right, Micah?" And I said, "You know what? I don't agree with your politics. In fact, I'm on a very different area of your politics." But I said, "Saban, doesn't matter, because I support great art, and I'll do whatever I can to help you, regardless of our politics. Doesn't matter. The politics isn't what matters to me at all, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just want to see great art made." And I think that's the mentality that we should have, right?
I
The
agree.
mentality is, this isn't political, in my opinion. It's not a political commentary at all. And I think everybody I think people agree on most things. In fact, you and I have had this conversation before, right? It's
Hmm.
these wedge issues that we tend to not agree on. So anybody who's listening to this, I'm not. I've thought a lot about it, and the only reason I bring it up is, again, like I said, I think that when you're doing public art, you have a public responsibility, and I think the thing that I admire about Saban is he does have a vision. And I
Hmm.
think it's an interesting discussion that we should all be having, those of us who are either making public art or who are supporting public art, about what is the role of the artist's vision versus the public's inclusion in that. And
Dude.
that is a very complicated discussion that we should all be better at having.
Well, he's going to have a heck of a time if he's got to work with the public here in Salt Lake because, I mean, it's so polarized. I mean, how is he ever going to
Yeah.
find consensus?
I don't know. It's a good question. And I don't know if you have to find consensus. It's like Michelangelo, right? I mean, maybe you do your best and and time will tell, right?
Yeah.
Because you're never going to get everybody behind everything you're doing. But damn it, if you're trying to be a reasonable person, I'll tell you, there's this funny story. It's one of my favorite stories of all time. And maybe we'll end it with it. We'll end this part of the discussion with this. There's this great story about Michelangelo again. There was this, he was a young sculptor. He'd competed with Leonardo da Vinci and one other sculptor for the right to carve a marble block that had been sitting in the public square for a very long time that turned into the David.
Yeah.
And Michelangelo got the commission from the Florentine Council to do it, and he immediately erected a privacy screen around it so that the public couldn't bother him while he was working on it.
Hmm.
But the people who had permission to come in and out of it were the counselors, the leaders that had commissioned it in the first place. So he was almost done with it, and there was one counselor who had missed almost the entire process of Michelangelo working on it, and he came near the very end, and he looks at the David for like 10 seconds, and he says to Michelangelo, you know, you could really take a little bit off that nose and it would be much better.
Oh, brother.
Can you imagine? You can relate, right?
Oh
As
my
a
gosh,
painter,
can I ever
like
relate?
you can relate. So like, and there's we know the story because his biographer Vasari says that Michelangelo, knowing this man was an idiot, yet being a diplomat, took his hammer and chisel, walked up the ladder, and as he walked up the ladder, he grabbed some marble dust. He got up to the top, hit the chisel without hitting the nose, pretending to hit the sculpture, and dropped the dust he'd gathered off the ladder. And the man said, now it's perfect.
Yeah, it's because, well, he is kind of an idiot, but more importantly, he's operating on ego, not Michelangelo, the patron.
He is working on,
And all
and
he had to do
that
was
is,
massage his ego, and so he could go home and say, "I told Michelangelo how to fix his sculpture."
yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
the funny thing is that when you're doing a public sculpture, there is some very nonsensical stuff like that happens
Hmm.
that you have to consider as an artist. Maybe there's actually substantive stuff that you have to actually do to that will actually make it better. But whatever it is, that attitude of Michelangelo, of he was still willing to climb up the ladder.
You know, I've done the exact same thing with certain corporations here in Utah.
Have you?
I have, where I've had a painting come back and they tell me to do something and I send it back and say it was done, and they go, "It's perfect," and I haven't done anything.
I think that's genius. I think you have to be that way.
Because I know dang well that these committees are all about ego. We just got to tell Jeff. We got to make sure Jeff knows that we're smarter than he is. We got to tell him how to fix
Yeah.
his painting. And then
Yeah.
once they believe that I recognize that they're smarter than me, then they'll let it go.
Yeah.
It's a weird.
It's
People are
nonsense.
weird.
It's absolute nonsense.
It is nonsense. Yeah. Anyway.
So today I wanted to talk about an artist that is not really I mean, we've talked about a few landscape painters. This guy is in some ways the granddaddy of all American landscape painters. His
Mm-hmm.
name is Albert Bierstadt. Everybody already knows that because they've seen it on the title of scene when they clicked
No
on this
secret
link,
there.
right?
Yeah.
But Albert Bierstadt, let's just put it into context. When he was just a few years old, his family moved from Germany,
Mm-hmm.
to the United States, Massachusetts, New Bedford in particular. And the rest of his life he did speak German, but the rest of his life he called himself an American. And this was 1830s and 40s when he came to the United States. And the United States at that time had no art schools. He showed a real interest in art from a young age. So when he got into his late teens, his mother had a minor artist who was a friend of the family, a kind of cousin, a distant cousin that lived in Dusseldorf. So they sent Bierstadt back there. And by the time he arrived, that cousin had died. He died. He died in the time that he'd written a letter and they'd written back and he traveled to
Oh,
get
that
there.
sucks.
So Bierstadt arrives. He's a teenager. He's in a foreign country. He speaks German, but he doesn't really know anybody there. And the first person that he kind of shows up with his portfolio to is Emanuel Leutze. And Emanuel Leutze, for those who don't know, he's the man who painted Washington crossing the Delaware.
Hmm.
Now, he hadn't painted Washington crossing the Delaware yet, but he was already world famous for doing these monumental history paintings. He was an American who had, likewise, at like 2 years old, his family had gone to Philadelphia. Then he'd gone back to Dusseldorf. And the people who were hanging out with Emanuel Leutze were, they were like Whistler, Eastman Johnson, Winslow Homer. These were all like Thomas Eakins. I don't think Eakins went, actually. I may be thinking of somebody else. I think William Merritt Chase was there.
Wow.
These are some of like the greatest artists, American artists at the time. They're all hanging out in Leutze's studio. And Leutze kind of mentors Bierstadt. But Bierstadt, he wants to study with a couple of artists who are known as the Sons of Thunder. There's these, which is a scriptural term. The Sons of Thunder is given to, what is it, James and John? Or is it?
I don't remember.
James and John. By Jesus Christ calls his apostles James and John, who I think are his brothers, the Sons of Thunder. So pull up the first painting we got here, the first couple of paintings.
This episode is brought to you in part by Rosemary Brushes. If you're one of my listeners who's a professional artist, you're already using Rosemary brushes. But for the rest of you, come on. Take your work a little more seriously. Stop buying the other brands. It's just not worth it. Every now and then you may get lucky and buy a good brush from another brand, but use the brand that professionals like myself are using. Go to rosemaryandco.com, link in the description or the show notes, and get yourself some quality brushes before your next painting.
Maybe before we get to an individual image while it's downloading, I should say that I spent about 2 years writing a catalog in preparation for the opening of our museum. This is our first major exhibition. And it's a fairly small exhibition. These images that I'm showing you are not all in the exhibition. I'm giving, for the podcast purposes, a much more general view of Albert Bierstadt. The exhibition I'm doing is about Bierstadt's paintings that he did when he was in Utah, and we can get more to those. But it's interesting anytime you delve into an artist's story. I just want to reiterate my humility that I don't know everything, right?
Yeah.
And there are people who are way better experts on Bierstadt than I am. So today is kind of, I'm really an expert on him in Utah, not on him in general. But I think I didn't want to keep us from talking about him in general. So let's talk about him more generally and what education looked like for him. He goes to Dusseldorf, and he spends time first with Loitza, and he paints this his first year that he's there. He's only there for 3.5 years. He's 23
Hmm.
years old when he paints this. This is the first known painting that he does.
Really?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
landscape
And
or architecture is really cool.
actually, he did it a few years later. I'm wrong. He did it like he did this right after he returned. I'm sorry. I got that
Okay.
wrong. It is really cool, though, isn't it? He started working on when he was there. And it's in the De Young Museum of Art, which is in San Francisco. It's called, a Roman fish market. Obviously, he's traveling around, kind of get generally educated. And the painting is it's not huge. It's like 28 inches by 37 inches.
Oh, it's actually bigger than I thought. I imagined it
Yeah.
small. Yeah.
This is the kind of stuff that was very popular in Dusseldorf and in Germany at the time. It was scenes of everyday life, and especially these Northern Europeans that were going to Italy and showing what they would have considered to be kind of like exotic life in Italy was like.
Hmm.
It's kind of the equivalent of, I have this French tutor that I work with, and he hated going to Rome on vacation because he felt like Rome was full of Prada and Gucci and Versace and Taurus. And then he went to Sicily, which is much further south, and there were no tourists during the time of year he went to Sicily. And he said, "This is the authentic Italy. Rome isn't authentic Italy because all the tourists and
Huh.
international
Yeah.
stores are there. But Sicily is the authentic Italy now." That's what he told me. And I wanted to tell him, this has always been the debate of like, even in Bierstadt's time, he's in the 1850s going to Rome, and he deliberately goes outside of the center of Rome to paint the people who were everyday people in order to paint the authentic Italy.
Hmm.
That's what's happening in this image, right?
Okay.
But you see quite a skill set here. He's 28 when he paints this,
Hmm.
and you got architecture, a huge depth of field that he's created.
Hmm.
It's really convincing, actually. Multiple figures, all in their costume. I don't know if he probably would have had models at some point, but he probably would have sketched a lot of people and then hired a few models to do the really important figures.
Hmm. When was this painted? Do you know?
1858.
Wow. Man, the brick is just cool.
Yeah, he spent a lot of time on it. He was a lot of time on that.
Yeah, that's definitely the highlight.
It's definitely not what he's not. It's not what he's known for. I mean, this is what he thought he went to Germany to study, but what he quickly ends up getting pulled into is the circle of Oswald and Augustus Achenbach, these
Hmm.
brothers, who, as I mentioned, were called the Sons of Thunder. So go to the A2, which is a painting that was done about the same time.
You're
I
gonna have
think
to
go in the
direct me.
opposite way. Go all the way to the other side. Um, Hold on. I can't. Let's see.
You too small on the
Yeah,
screen.
it's the second one in. This is just in the opposite order.
Okay.
This is Bierstadt about the same time,
Really?
and yeah, and if you put it side by the painting next to it, which is done by
Whoops.
Augustus Achenbach, who's his
Okay.
mentor,
Oh,
you can
interesting.
see a relationship. Boy, they look like they even bleed into one another, don't they?
Oh my,
Almost
they do.
the
They
way
share the
they're.
same horizon. Yeah,
But
interesting.
the Achenbachs were kind of the founders of this. Founders may not be the right word. The perfectioners of this German landscape school in Munich, and it was very observational. It was not a very romantic view of, if it didn't exaggerate too much what was in front of them.
Yeah.
But all plein air painting, all landscape painting is ordering chaos. And so it's
Hmm.
not like you're really painting exactly what's in front of you. You know this, right? I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
you're really making choices. I mean, even look at like how he's put in the cattle Achenbach has on the right hand side,
Mm-hmm.
how he's carefully got like the light cattle going through the dark cattle, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that
Mm-hmm.
you can differentiate the cloud. It doesn't look like a blob of cattle. He's deliberately and strategically placed those lead white cattle
Yeah.
in different places. And these are the kinds of lessons that Bierstadt learns, is that on one hand, there's it looks like a natural landscape. It's not exaggerated from from a natural perspective of those are real trees, those are real rocks, there's real colors,
Yeah. The lighting
and
effect is
and
completely natural.
everything's completely natural, right?
Yeah.
But there's also a very careful control of leading the eye through a composition. I mean, look on Bierstadt's on the left, how he's framed it with the trees on one side. He's got a tiny foreground with those deer with some interest in the foreground. And he's got a middle ground with the careful echoing and the calm water of all those trees.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's got a background that kind of leads you out of the painting in another way, right? So everything, he's got that boat.
Hmm.
It's all, I mean, it's a lot of stagecraft that Bierstadt has learned from these guys. Go to the painting next to it,
Would
which
this
is
have been a
also an
studio
August.
painting?
I think it would have started, and Bierstadt has this practice all his life. It all starts as an oil painting in it's
Plein
a
air?
small kind of cigar box top. But they would like literally have like discarded cigar box tops, and they would paint oils on them.
Hmm.
And then they would take them back to their studio and they'd work them up over time. This is also an Augustus Achenbach landscape
Dude,
of
Achenbach is
Norway.
awesome.
He is unbelievable. We've got to do a show on Achenbach,
Holy
because
moly.
the Achenbach brothers, I think, are sorely forgotten outside of Germany. And their ability to paint, what would seem kind of like boring scenes and make them incredible detailed,
Yeah.
very multi-layered, thoughtful pieces are just unbelievable, right? I mean,
Wow.
isn't that the most
It's both
fascinating
loose and tight at the
piece of
same
work?
time.
Yeah.
Look at the simplicity and thinness of these back mountains. And then,
And they're not thickly painted for the most part.
no,
Some of the foreground is.
some of it is, but then, man, you look at this tree, the detail, insanity.
So Bierstadt takes this
Mm-hmm.
and he comes back to the United States and he becomes one of the major figures in the Hudson River School. Because he goes back and he sets up his studio near the Hudson, in the Hudson River Valley, where you were born and raised,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And he in fact, let me get the name of the city where he's got his studio. Let me see if I can get the exact name here. Studio was in oh oh come on, Irvington, New York.
Irvington.
So Irvington
Huh.
is it's in Westchester County, which is where you
Oh,
were, right?
okay. No, I was in Orange, just above
No,
Westchester.
you were okay. So he's in Irvington, which is it's
So that's
it's a
closer to the city.
suburban village
Mm-hmm.
in the town of Greenberg, and it's only 20 miles north of Manhattan.
Yeah.
So you're right. I mean, he is closer.
Yeah.
He's closer than you were. But that's where his studio ends up being. And we're going to skip ahead because what happens is he comes back in 1858 to the United States, which is the worst time possible because the Civil War is just brewing at this point. And you want to be a painter during the Civil War in the United States. I mean, all money is going into the war effort, pretty much, right? And there's a funny thing that happens, which is there's this event that almost no scholars have written about this part. This is kind of my contribution to the Bierstadt story. Is there's an event that happens in Utah called the Mountain Meadows Massacre, and it's where this group of largely Arkansas immigrants are traveling from Arkansas to the to California as part of the gold rush in the wagon and in a wagon train, and they pass through what is called Fish Lake on the old Spanish trail that was set up by the Spanish fathers, the Spanish religious fathers who had set up some of the early trading routes in the Western United States. And as they travel through, they come to this place called Cedar City. And there had been all of these tensions between the Mormon pioneers who were driven out violently from the Midwest to Utah, where they settle. And the Mormon settlers are also having tensions with the Native Americans. And the Native Americans and the Mormons, in addition to having tension with each other, are having tension with the immigrants who are passing through to California. And 150 something people get killed, mostly Arkansas immigrants, in this massacre. And the United States government says that now this principal route that has been used by all the people going west, almost all the people going west to California, it's not safe anymore because it's passing through Mormon territory. And Mormons are going to kill you. Right? This is what happens. And so they hire a guy named Colonel Lander to create a new route that goes north of Utah, and that becomes the Oregon Trail. And Lander has two sisters that are artists, and he is a member of the Society of Washington Artists, and he's familiar with Emanuel Leutze, who's recently painted Washington Crossing the Delaware. He's in Washington, D.C., and Leutze says to Bierstadt and to Lander, you need an artist to go back west with you, Lander. And Lander says, absolutely agree. If we're going to go back west, we need somebody who can show the American public what the West looks like. So they hire Bierstadt under Leutze's recommendation.
Wow.
To go with Lander. And I mean, this is about as primitive as it gets. They go, there's no railroad, and they travel west for several weeks. And the next, but right before he goes, I should say, there's a painting that Bierstadt does. It's the next painting in that lineup. It's called Sunlight and Shadow, and it's a painting that he does in Paris. And Bierstadt, this kind of becomes Bierstadt's calling card for the first decade of his career, which this becomes a well-known print that almost every American has on their wall, that is the American artist who paints as well as the old masters. And this is the Cluny Museum in Paris. It's the courtyard of the Cluny Museum. And it's not at all what Bierstadt's known for, but it's what gets him the job.
Yeah.
Right? As an artist. So then he goes, and the next painting is one of the first works he does.
What?
This is the Lander exhibition.
Are you freaking kidding me?
No. I mean, it's nighttime. They've got a wagon.
Yeah, could you start a little simpler, maybe? Like just a landscape?
And it's a very like it's almost like in our world today, we're so used to seeing paintings of wagons in the Western United States. This was a new idea when Bierstadt did it, the wagon in a painting. And so when Bierstadt did this, it was like, oh my gosh, these men are going into the untamed wilderness. And they've got a wagon. That's all they've got is a wagon, right? They're just going out there. And to me, it looks like a very European painting. It looks like it could have been done.
It does.
By
well, except for the
any
subject
number
matter.
of European artists, right? It doesn't look anything new. But then he sees the Rocky Mountains. He gets as far as Colorado and Wyoming, and he does the next painting. And
holy crap.
Lander's Peak, it's about 12 feet wide and about 8 feet tall, and it's of the Rocky Mountains. And this blows everybody's mind. It's in the Met today.
Yeah.
So if you are staring at Emanuel Lewitz's Washington Cross in the Delaware, the most famous painting of the 19th century by an American, and you look to the left, this is to the left of it, hanging on the wall.
Wow.
And it is a
remarkable.
mind-blowing painting. It is mind-blowing.
You said it's 12 feet wide?
It's about that. Let me look it up for sure, because
look at the little ground, or what is that? A ferret, groundhog? What is that thing? Whatever it is, it's cute. Prairie dog. It's probably a prairie dog.
Probably a prairie dog. It's called the Rocky Mountain Lander's Peak. I mean, they name it after Lander, right? He paints this in 1863, only 5 years after he does that Italian scene that we saw. There's only 5 years later.
Jeez.
Right. So now he's 32 years old, and this painting is 73 inches high and 10 feet wide. So it's roughly 6 by 10. I was wrong by a couple feet. 6 by 10.
Wow.
And this is the crazy thing, is that when he paints it and it goes to New York, everybody thinks he's making it up. Everybody thinks he's making it up.
Because they can't imagine a landscape like that?
They can't imagine a landscape looking like this.
Wow.
There's nowhere like this in the world, right? They just can't imagine like this. I mean, maybe New Zealand now, right? This is what we think of as New Zealand, right? Mm-hmm. There are a lot of places kind of like this in the world, but this is like, look at how he's kind of, if there's anything he really hasn't romanticized it, because his journals are full of experiences of running into with the Native Americans and having experiences with them and trading with them. And Lander and his party, and Lander was a member of the U.S. Army. They were all trading and having very positive relations at this time. And Bierstadt had a very close relationships with Native American chiefs and leaders. They all think that Bierstadt is making up these landscapes, exaggerating them. I mean, he goes back 2 more times, one more time before the railroad comes in. So Utah is famous in the 19th century for being the place where the rails meet in 1869. Promontory Point, where the Golden Spike is hit. And that joins the country together with the entire rail system. Bierstadt comes back west 4 times in all. He gets to Wyoming in this first time in 1863. No, 1850.
Is that where this is, Wyoming?
1850. Yeah, this is 1863. Is that right? No. This, I got the date wrong, everybody. I'm sorry. He does this. 1861, I think he comes the first time. And he paints this 1863, and then he immediately comes back after that with his own money. And he goes back with another wagon train. Then he comes back in 1872, and then he comes back in 1881. So he comes back west 3 separate times. The first time he paints this, and this is his big product from the painting. The second time, it's the next painting. And he does 2 of them. This is Yosemite. And I want you to put this Yosemite next to the other Yosemite that he does right afterwards.
Wow.
Which he's working up in a studio, and he's making different choices.
Oh, yeah, he even changed it. The water.
Yeah. So he's got the landscape. And what's crazy about this is that photography doesn't really catch up to him until the 1880s. And these paintings go on view in Europe. They go through all the capitals of the states in the east of the United States, and then they go to Europe. And people keep saying he's making this up, he's making this up, he's making this up, until the first photography comes back. And then they say, oh my gosh, Bierstadt didn't make it up. They literally like hold up photographs next to his works. And there are some things he's exaggerating.
Yeah.
Right. And there are compositional details. But for the most part, he's not making up the scale. He's not making up much of the palette. Some of this like golden hour he's choosing, right? And he's choosing he's choosing like foreground details. He's choosing, darks and lights as he's going through it.
Man.
But you can see the relationship to Achenbach. If you put that Achenbach painting of Norway next to this,
Which
that
one
one,
is that? Yeah.
it's that one. Do you know what I mean? When I look at these two, I see a definite relationship,
Oh, for sure. I mean, I see
right?
differences as well, but
But you see, there's a real this school, and Bierstadt gets criticized for it later because people say that he's too much like a scientist and he's not enough of an artist. Because
ah,
these, and I think it's a
interesting.
false criticism. But you got to remember what comes after Bierstadt is Impressionism, even in the United States. And these Impressionist painters, they start exaggerating a lot of colors and they become very dramatic in the choices that they're making.
Yeah.
And the criticism of Bierstadt later is, you know, Bierstadt isn't creative enough. He's only painting what's in front of him.
Eh,
You know,
yeah. Right.
which which I think is such a funny criticism because in his lifetime, in the beginning of his career, he's being told, "There's no way that's real, Bierstadt. You're making it up. It's too fantastical." But he's really kind of like an anthropologist
Hmm.
of anthropologist is the wrong word because that's the study of humans, right? But he's a natural scientist. That's what the Hudson River School really even prided itself on, right? They were naturalists. They went out and they saw what was in front of them, and there was a fidelity to
Yeah.
nature and the grandeur, and there was an appreciation of nature. And he even writes about it many times. He's like, if you could just see, if I can just be honest about what's in front of me, and I cannot get in the way of what I'm seeing, what's in front of me, and just communicate honestly what's there, then I will have done my job. And that becomes the liability later in his career.
Hmm. Yeah. But it's also not true. It's interesting. I was talking to Josh Clare years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and he's such a great landscape painter. And I said to
Oh,
him,
he is.
he is, I said to him, what is your secret? What is it you could share with me to help me to get to the next level of landscape painting? He's like, really, it's just painting what you see. There's nothing to it. And I'm like, I don't really, really. And so I went out with him
Yeah.
painting sometime later. And of course, he cranked one out in like 10 minutes. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but not much. And I
Mm.
walked over to his easel and I said, Josh, that's not what I see. And he goes,
Yeah.
well, I guess I take artistic liberties. And I said, but in my studio, you told me you just paint what you see. That's the secret. I think a lot of times artists, I don't think he's unusual in that. I think I'm guilty of that too sometimes. As a portrait painter, I paint what I see, but I don't actually paint everything that I see, you know.
There's a great Picasso quote who says, "Art is a lie that tells the truth."
That's, I hate to be a
Which
fan of Picasso quote, but that's a good quote.
it's a great quote. It's a great
Yeah.
quote because sometimes you have to lie about something in order to get to the essence of it, right?
Yeah, you have to
And
change things to make it look maximally accurate, which is a weird phrase, but you know,
and these things that Bierstadt did, there were some interesting things that he did. Remember, no tourist has been in the Yosemite Valley really. Native Americans had, but he's trekking out for days into this rugged area where there are no paths. So he's a mountaineer. He's also, and he's very experienced going to difficult places. He's painting in small canvases that he's bringing with him, usually just cigar box tops. And then he's going back to a studio in Irvington, New York, and he's building them up on enormous canvases, which are 10 feet wide. And I think that one of the things that to me I think is a skill that we've lost because of the modern age with photography. It's funny when you read old letters, people would write to each other. I talked with Jeff HEIN today. I can't believe how deep brown his eye color was, and he had this mustache which was thick and manly, and he had a winning smile, and his teeth were very straight, and his hair was recently cut, and his shoulders were broad. And they would like describe people in enormous detail because they didn't have photographs of them, right? And they'd walk away and they'd pick up these details on each other. And old letters are full of these kinds of things. I think Bierstadt going to these places, he would capture these notes. And I'm going to show you a few notes of the kinds of things he would capture in a few minutes. And then he would go back to his studio and he would remember from his notes enough to fill it in. One of my favorite authors of all time is this essayist named David Sedaris. And David Sedaris he's a journal keeper. He's kind of a Luddite when it comes to technology. He doesn't like technology. And he wrote this essay in his latest book about going to a wildlife park in Tanzania. And the guides keep saying to him, why aren't you taking a picture of those lions? Why aren't you taking a picture of those giraffes? And he said, because I'm writing it down and I remember it by like, I don't need to take a picture. And it struck me so much that like when I travel, there's studies that show that when you take a picture of something, your brain does not store the image in your head. It stores the reference to the photograph on your phone. It says, I don't remember the scene. I now remember where I stored it so I can look it up. And this is one of the things that I envy about Bierstadt is that he's got a memory that he's recorded in the place with his study. And then he goes back to his studio and it's not 100% memory like you and I have said. If you put this side by side with the other one next to it, they're two mostly similar. The one on the right he did first, the one on the left he did second. And I don't know which I prefer the second one he did second. And I think that but if you could also argue that it's sixes, right? I mean, there's real like they're both great paintings. You wouldn't say no to either one of them if Bierstadt gave it to you. You wouldn't be like, I don't know, I kind of feel like this one's a piece of crap. I want the other one, right? Like it's just they're both fantastic. And he paints these and he's sending them, he's going back painting up a bunch of things. And here are some other things that he painted on his trips. Go to the next painting. This is a nocturne. Of these, I didn't bring them because we could go forever on them. This next one's a nocturne that he did of a campsite. And it's just you've been outside at night and seen mountains at moonlight. It is just the most beautiful little nocturne poem of a painting that he takes notes, because a lot of these artists would actually note blue or this color blue or turquoise or whatever on their canvas. And then they'd go back to their studio because he's not painting it on the scene. He's taking notes on the scene, right? But before we go, isn't that just the most beautiful composition? Foreground, you've got these kinds of like yellows and oranges, and then the middle ground super dark, and then the back, that cool mountain.
I've been doing Jeff's online mentorship program for about a year now, and it is awesome. Everything is online, super streamlined. If you can be there, you have the ability to talk to him once a week and he can review your work and help you. If you can't be there, it's pre-recorded. You can go back and even re-watch things if you missed something during class or couldn't be there. So the online portion of it is almost better than real life because you can always go back to it, which is awesome. The demos are recorded. It's just like all available whenever you need it. And I'm a stay-at-home mom of 4 and my time is limited and it's also very interrupted. And so to be able to go back has been clutch for me. And you get to work with Jeff HEIN, who's awesome. He's tough. The assignments are simple, but difficult, and they're difficult to make us all better. And he's able to give us these assignments, coach us through it, help us stay excited to progress. And so it's just been a great experience. I am so grateful that he has been willing to take time away from his own art to offer all of us to have it. So if you're thinking about doing it, it's amazing.
To learn more about how you could have me as a personal mentor, check out the link to HEINatelier.com in the show notes or video description.
And it just, you can imagine, this is a scene that the public is enjoying too. You don't have to be a connoisseur to appreciate this, because you feel like you're falling into a novel. Like you're exploring the West with him. And that's the benefit of being him. Next one. Okay, this blows my mind. Okay, so we're gonna have an entire podcast about this at some point. But in the 18th century, really from the 17th century to the mid 19th century, if you were studying art in Europe, really the only people who were getting the highest scholarships and commissions were figure painters. And figure painters, you had to, that's the people who were getting scholarships to go study and who were getting major commissions. So at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, at the schools in Munich and in Spain and England, you'd kind of graduate from the fine arts school, and then you would apply to be one of two people sent every year to Rome to study. And there would be a sculptor and there would be a figure painter. And each one of them had basically the same test, which is for 1 week, you'd be put in front of a model, you'd be given the same size of paper, the same model, and you'd be given 3 hours or 4 hours at a time with this model, 3 sessions that week, along with all the other competitors. And you had to leave the drawing behind and come back and do it. And then they started realizing that landscape painters are doing things that are just as complicated as figurative artists are doing. And so we got to come up with a test for landscape painters. So they start coming maps all over Europe of complicated trees that are as difficult to paint as a figure. And these become the trees that you have to go and paint when you are applying for a scholarship. And you are competing with other people painting the same tree, and you're treating the tree like a human figure in its complication. That it's your job to simplify a complicated tree, and you're being judged, and the winner goes. So you're being judged. I don't know. It's a hard thing. I mean, I think it's something that I need to do more investigating on. The Fitzwilliam Museum in Cambridge recently did a show on all these German landscape painters who did them, and they usually did them as pencil drawings or charcoal drawings. And this is exactly what Bierstadt is doing by showing off these trees that he's done in California, right? He's showing his skills as a landscape painter, which are just as complicated as anybody who's doing anatomy, right? I mean, these are complicated, hard to do trees. These are not Bob Ross happy trees. These are portraits of trees, which the level of, just like a figure, which you're simplifying the muscle to ideal proportions and bringing the highlights and the lowlights and drawing an eye from the top of the tree down to the bottom. He's doing that same thing here, but he's doing it in oil paints with trees. So I mean, here we've got, like, Bierstadt isn't just interested in doing telephoto lens portraits of mountains. He's also got complicated approaches to up close foliage, like it's a complicated figurative study. He's in his day, I think people really recognized how it wasn't just, I remember the first time I talked with Jacob Collins back in 2005, 2007. And I remember he said what appealed to him about the Hudson River School, which Bierstadt was a major figure in, was that they didn't just accidentally put a tree at a certain elevation on a mountain. They knew that tree, that kind of tree, grew at that elevation, right? They knew what a tree looked like up close, and maybe they would choose to paint the whole tree, or maybe they do, but they were scientists. And when you look at this, it's a combination of science and, like, he's just like a lot of artists know the anatomy of a human figure and can name every muscle, but they don't paint every muscle every time because it doesn't make a good picture. So the next two images I want to put together. This one's the study, and this one's the final painting on the right, which isn't a super great image, but it's one of his most famous images. So he paints this, I think, in 1888, which the railroads have already been built, and the buffalo herds are disappearing. And he gets together with some of the Native Americans who he's friends with, and they decide to stage a buffalo hunt to show the skills of the Native Americans that have already disappeared. The buffaloes are largely gone at this point. They disappeared like 20 years earlier. And so, you could look at this and say it's an exploitative image on one hand, but on the other hand, he was actually collaborating with Native Americans at the time to try and conjure a world that was disappeared at this point. And this is the kind of romance novel that he's making and painting at the time as an adventure. To me, he is a competent horse painter, but it's his landscapes and his figures are okay. They're okay.
Mm-hmm.
The buffalo's okay, but this is a
wildly
popular. It's a wildly popular image at the time, and you have to kind of mention it. And then you go to the next image, which is just a study of clouds that he did that we have in our exhibition at the museum, and you're like, oh, that's way more interesting than his figures.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so abstracted, like what is that actually of? Is it a mountaintop? Is it like what is it? And this is a small study. This is only like 4 by 5 inches.
Mm.
And to me, this is really the kind of abstract work that he's doing as a landscape painter that's fascinating. Is that it's the darks, it's the lights, it's the drawing your eye around images with certain highlights and a palette that's look at that. He's got like one lapis lazuli blue in the top left.
Yeah,
but the rest of it is all grays.
Did he always sign his studies just A.B.?
Yeah, he usually did. Yeah. The next painting is of the Salt Lake Valley, and I want to put it up next to, this is a finished painting he did. I want to put it next to a photograph that's a modern day photograph of the same scene.
That's nutty.
I commissioned that photograph to be done, and it gives you an idea of his level of accuracy.
Wait. You paid someone to do this? Why don't you just go take it yourself?
No, because a lot of them I had to we had to get drone shots to get as close
to get that
of a work as we could get.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So
that's wild.
He comes to Utah 3 times, and this is a pretty accurate. Different times a year. He's painting probably spring, right? And I paid somebody to do.
You're way up on the East fall. Bench. Is that where you are? Because that's the University of Utah.
You're looking. Yeah, that's kind of like where the cemetery is up on 11th
You're
Avenue.
Way up there.
Yeah.
Huh.
But I mean, look at how fairly accurate there's some things he doesn't quite get a little bit, but some of them he mostly gets.
It's just,
I'm going to show you
that's so cool to see this and live in this valley and imagine him here when it was almost empty.
You know what else is funny is that I found contemporary artists who had painted at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And there was much more development in the valley, but he deliberately erased it except for a couple of houses because he was not interested in the civilization at all.
So it wasn't that empty. Okay.
It wasn't that empty. But, it is funny how he would. I think I've got 2 photographs in a row, so ignore the next image. But,
okay.
But, but by the way, go back and notice how simple and restricted the palette is.
Yeah, this certainly doesn't show his level of excellence. It's just sort of, but it's just a study, right?
It's just a study.
Yeah.
So now go to the next 2. out, and then the one to the left of it.
Yeah,
This is
this
the
one's the one you
entrance
had in your
to
gallery.
yeah, and there's the image side by side.
Isn't that wild? I remember seeing that in your gallery, and then my wife and I going up for a hike and driving right past this and being like, that's
Yeah,
it. That's where he was. That's what he looked at.
that's
It was
exactly
the
where it
coolest
was.
thing.
This was famous in the day because this is where the stone was taken for the Salt Lake Temple, which was
Mm,
a famous building in the 19th century, still is. And it's also the site of what was called it was a mine disaster that in the 19th century, um, this rich vein of silver had been discovered. And immediately the vein ran out of silver. But the people who knew that it ran out lied. They pretended that there was still a lot of silver in it. And they sold the entire mine on the London Stock Exchange for millions and millions of dollars.
mm.
And then a couple years later, when the investors all found out that there was no more money in it, they lost millions of dollars. It almost created a war between the United States and England in the 1880s because
Jeez.
people didn't get their money back out of it. And Bierstadt painted this at that exact moment, knowing that had gone on in that,
Hmm.
like in these mountains right here. It's one of the bigger paintings that he did. Now I'm going to show you a study. You're going to love this. Next two images.
Can I ask you one thing though? I mean,
Mhm.
this river
Mhm.
is technically on the other side of the road.
It depends on who you talk to based on like today, how much development's happened.
Oh, okay.
It may have actually gone there. He's definitely exaggerating
Well, that's what I was
a
wondering
lot
if
of
he's
things,
improvising
right?
down here in the foreground.
My personal take is that he did improvise that.
Yeah, that's what I
I
thought
think he
too.
did.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's
Okay.
doing it for scale. He's doing it for scale.
It's a great move, no doubt.
So he goes to this place in the Utah Valley, which is south of Salt Lake, called Mount Timpanogos. And this is the peak in Mount Timpanogos. This is a photograph.
Hmm.
Okay. The next image is his study that he did of the same mountain.
Oh,
So
his
do them
studies are
side by
very
side.
crude. Interesting.
Yeah.
That's good to learn from.
So go put those two images together.
Wow.
Okay. So you know what? It's more of an angle, more of an oblique angle, his painting, than
Yeah.
the one that I could get. But I still had to have somebody climb up.
Wait. So you're
8,000
looking at,
feet.
so this plane is this plane right here.
That's exactly right.
And
That's
then this
exactly right.
peak is this peak right here.
That's right.
So
at a
you're
little bit
looking
more
at
of
it
an angle.
obliquely. Okay. I got
That's
you.
right.
Yeah.
I could not get the photographer closer.
Yeah.
But that study is only 4 by 5 inches, and it's on a small piece of cardboard. That's a cigar box top,
Wow.
basically, right?
Wow.
And he climbed. It would have taken 2 days to climb up to where he got to do that study.
Why do you think it would have taken him so long? Because he's carrying so much crap?
No, just because it was really hard to get to. There was no like.
Oh, there are no trails
today,
and stuff.
Like I talked to a mountaineer. There were no trails to get up there.
Oh, God.
So he climbed up there. It would have been super cold. It would have been very harsh conditions. He gets up there. He takes these notes.
Dude, artists are tough back then. We are so
tough.
pampered today.
You know, this is gonna. I hope he doesn't get upset with me quoting him, but I remember Brian Taylor telling me that he had been told by an artist when he was trying to make a choice in his life whether or not he was going to go into a certain kind of art or the art that he ended up going into. And one person told him that the healthiest artists are landscape artists.
Because of the
And,
hiking.
and Brian said, why? And he said, because you're constantly outdoors, you're constantly moving, versus some of these artists who are sitting indoors for 80 hours a week working.
Yeah.
And at Bierstadt was absolutely like the ideal of that. Like he was out there doing it. He was climbing to these impossible places, and he's
well, not
getting
to
the
mention he's not
sunset.
taking airplanes. He's taking stagecoaches and trains and I mean it's ridiculous the amount of effort he puts into traveling to these places.
So this is a note painting. I'm going to show you a finished painting that he did in the same valley on the same trip. Let me see the next two images.
Oops.
So get rid of the.
I gotta get rid of that one. Hold on. Wait,
So this
that's the
is.
oh.
So this is that's the Utah Valley, And the one on the right is roughly a 20 by 30 inch painting.
Utah Valley as in Utah County?
Yeah, Utah County. And he paints that that's the Jordan River in Utah Valley with a small footbridge going over the front of it.
Yeah.
This painting's hung in the office of Malcolm Forbes in New York for 30 years.
Wow.
And if you want to just go to the painting itself, you can see the difference between a study that he did and a finished work. I mean, look at how bright and how, it's a little washed out, maybe, this painting, but there's a very dynamic and colorful scene that he's worked up here, right?
Yeah. Wait, and are you telling me you have a finished version of this?
This is the finished version.
How big is this?
20 by 30.
It looks like a study to me. Compared to his other work?
Oh, yeah. We don't have any evidence of him working his Utah paintings into major works other than, the few that I'm showing here.
No kidding.
I'm going to show you even more of a study. This one will blow your mind. Go to not this one. This one's good, though. This one's also a large, a finished work. It's not as much of a study, but it's somewhere between a study and a finished work. And then look at the photo of it next to it.
Okay. Huh. That's too cool. Did you have fun putting this together?
I did. So that lake in the foreground is what is Liberty Park in Utah.
It is? Wait, that's not.
Yeah, it's
that's
not
not
Great
what
Salt Lake.
That little pond that's in Liberty Park used to be a huge lake.
So he's sitting there and making it look like a bigger lake.
Oh, okay.
And then that's the Salt Lake Valley.
Oh yeah, he
and
is
you can even see the
definitely
U.
taking liberties. No pun intended. Liberty Park. Yeah, that's amazing.
But look at how he's got the shape of these mountains for the most part, right? There's some
that
details
nice
he's
wedge
missing.
right there. It's so obvious. It's that.
But you see that he's, I hired a photographer to get this, and you look at it and you think, oh, you know what? He was pretty accurate with the way that he would handle the mountains themselves, right?
He was.
The way he would get you into a painting was a little different.
Yeah, he's really accurate.
But now I'm going to show you a sketch, an absolute cigar box top sketch, which is the next one. It's tiny. It's like 3x4.
What in the heck?
This is what he would take to the studio to work up those paintings.
Get out of town. Are you serious?
So this and this
and
is
notes.
like,
He must have had so many notes.
Because this is what he's working up those paintings with. He's got, I think this is largely a gouache. He's got like, and maybe it's oil.
It looks like oil to me.
Maybe it's oil. It is oil. You're right.
Yeah, it's too thick.
But look at how little information he's got here.
I mean, he's not a great. I mean, I know it's not his goal, but you mentioned Brian Taylor. Brian Taylor could wipe the floor with him a plein air painting.
Yeah.
Well, his real magic is when he gets in the studio.
It is. It is absolutely.
That's when he just blows him out of the water. Not blows Brian out of the water, but
go to the one
throws the paintings out of the water.
So keep this one up, and then also put this one next to it if you can.
The one that I'm hovering over?
Yeah.
Oh wait, my bad. Hold on. Yeah, I mean, look at.
So imagine that the one on the right is the study that he takes into the studio that he builds into that painting on the left in the studio, right? Yeah. He brings back from his trips, he brings back these small cigar box tops on the top right, dozens of them, and then he goes into the studio and he makes.
That's where the magic happens.
And these other ones, these ones on the top right are 4x5. Maybe he's worked some into 8x10s. They're not very big. And then he goes back to the studio and he works them into like 8x10 foot paintings, 5x10 foot paintings, 40x60 paintings.
Do you know what else he's doing, in my opinion? Is, well, when I do a landscape study, or in particular, the thing I do more, which is portrait, if I spend 3 hours in front of a model and paint his or her portrait, even if the portrait sucks in the end and it's unfinished and it's nothing special, that 3 hours of thinking through that process solidifies my memory of that face in a way that never could happen if I just stared for 3 hours at that person.
Interesting.
You know what I mean? Because the level of study that it takes to do a portrait, even in a short
Mhm.
amount of time, the level of observation that takes place, it just doesn't happen just looking at a thing. You're
Mm.
really digging deep. So I suspect that he gets as much out of the memory that he's recording as doing these studies as he does from the studies themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. He doesn't always wait to get back to New York. For a time, he set up a studio in San Francisco.
Yeah.
So maybe sometimes he would go on a couple of these trips. He goes to the Yosemite Valley for a couple of weeks. And then he comes back to San Francisco, which is just a few days away,
Hmm.
and he paints for a month. And some of them he works up later when he goes back to New York.
That's the
So
part
I
that's
don't, you know,
remarkable to me is the time in between the studies and the paintings. I don't know
yeah,
how he retains the information for that long. He must be
I don't know
pretty
either.
sharp.
I think so. I think, you know, but I mentioned this before. It's worth stating again that by the time he gets to the end of his career, there's they're really bored with him.
Oh,
They
that's
just think
sad.
that they basically say, "Oh, here comes Bierstadt with his miles of canvas again, of giant mountains." And like, who cares, kind of thing. Yawn, yawn, yawn. And they're more interested in impressionism and in exaggerated ideas of what landscapes and people's, you know, artistic interpretations of landscapes rather than actual accurate landscapes. And I think that he dies feeling like he's unappreciated.
Hmm.
And I think that it's this is what happens to almost every artist who lives long enough, right? Is that the next generation comes up with a new idea, and their ideas, which were once new, are now looked upon with a certain yawn.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even like because he became so dominant that everybody's imitating him for a long time, and then they move past him, and it's like you know, we're all tired of Marvel movies right now. Like
Mm-hmm.
another Spider-Man's coming out.
Mm-hmm.
Eh. And then we watched the original Iron Man. We're like, oh my gosh, that was such a brilliant movie, right? Or we'll be
Mm-hmm.
like, we'll watch a movie and we'll think, man, like that's why we thought they were so great, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that Bierstadt's contribution as a Hudson River School painter is he brings this ethic, this real professionalism from Germany. He's only there for like 4 years, 3.5, 4 years. And he comes back and he applies a real rigor and kind of a method for doing landscape painting, which is observation plus compositional intelligence, right?
Mm-hmm.
And artistic placement, and his artistry is in how does he light a scene, and where does he choose to put details, and where does he choose to not put details, and to create drama through the way he's put the composition together, and also by painting big. He's doing all these big scenes, and then he's going out as a naturalist and an adventurer and mountaineer, almost like a kind of Indiana Jones,
Mm-hmm.
going where no artist has gone before, and then he's bringing back these discoveries of landscapes that people think are fake because they're so over the top.
Hmm.
And he does that for 20 or 30 years. And then everybody's like, okay, now we've seen it all. We've all seen photographs. Thanks, old man.
Hmm.
Not interested anymore.
Yeah.
And now we want to see small landscapes that are done with hypercolor and with 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 all these crazy colors, and we're kind of bored. And
Yeah.
it's an interesting thing to look at his career and realize that our imagination of the West is still Bierstadt's initial take of the West.
Mm-hmm.
When Americans and Europeans and the rest of the world think of what Yosemite looks like, and even the artists who went into the Grand Canyon, when they went to the Grand Canyon, these first artists, they were imitating Bierstadt's interpretation of Yosemite and Yellowstone and the Rocky Mountains. They were doing Bierstadt's version of the Grand Canyon. And so Bierstadt sets up what the world, the Western America looks like for even our day. He's the one who defined it.
That's great. I got one question before you leave. Why do you suppose, because I was just having a conversation, I wish I remember who, some artist or a student or something, about careers and why some last and some don't, and some never take off and some do. And one of the thoughts I had was that an artist is likely to do better if they're able to pivot, if they're not a one-trick pony, if they're able to sort of ride the wave in the art world.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not suggesting that artists should do that. It's really up to the individual artist, and they got to do what feels right to them. But the question is, why do you suppose he didn't pivot? Why do you suppose he didn't see the Impressionists coming? And I'm not suggesting that he should be something he's not. I guess what I'm asking is, why do you suppose he didn't find interest in the new landscape?
No, it's a good question. I don't know. I think that the answer to that is above my pay grade.
I mean, no one could know, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that
because he had to have seen his career falling apart.
It's almost like saying to an artist, to somebody who's developed all of these skills as a French cook, and then all of a sudden Mexican food becomes very popular, and they're like, why don't you abandon all of your French cooking skills and start learning how to cook like a Mexican amazing chef?
I know.
It's not that there's anything.
It's not that there's
anything. It's not that Mexican food is better or worse or less complicated. It's just, to me, it's like, oh, you want me to start over? Like, it's like a new vocabulary. I don't know. It's to me, I think that, in some ways, this is where it does benefit you to die young.
Yeah.
As a great artist, right?
Yeah.
Because then you're remembered for being at the top of your game and on the crest of the wave, and not at the backside of the wave after it's moved on to another thing.
I guess I'm just coming from it from a perspective of someone who's interested in a lot of art forms, a lot of, I feel like I could have had a happy career as an artist doing many different genres and many different approaches. And so when I see someone like Bierstadt, who really, he dug in, because if he saw his career falling apart and he continued to paint the way he's painting, he either dug in for the reason you say, I put all this money into French cooking, I don't want to do Spanish food, or he just had one set of skills and just didn't know where to go. I guess we'll never know.
Here's another way of thinking about it, though, is that the lack of interest in him was only temporary, because then within, now there are how many biographies, how many exhibitions every year on Bierstadt. His works hang in the Met, the Smithsonian, the Getty.
Yeah, but he's dead.
And he's dead. You're right. But I think good work always gets appreciated in one avenue.
Yeah, you're right.
And most of the people that were saying he was unfashionable, who we don't even give a damn about their work anymore.
Yeah.
Right. His work, quality work always rises to the top in the end.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't see it during your lifetime, but it happens.
Yeah. Well, that's a good way of looking at it. Hey, thanks again, man. And I hope your team won. And thanks for the sacrifice for all of us.
You're welcome, buddy.
All
Love
right.
talking to you, man.
All right. Good to see you, man. Have a good one.
Ciao, buddy.
Later.
Thanks for tuning in to the Undraped Artist Podcast. If you enjoyed it, subscribe. And if you could, leave a comment or review. That really helps the channel. Please share the show with your friends, and if you're feeling generous, consider a monthly donation at theundrapedartist.com. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next week.